Welcome back to Making Tracks with me, Nkongo. We've explored two critical and concurrent phases of light rail development, the environmental and the design phases. After completing the environmental phase this summer, the Blue Line Extension project will officially begin the right-of-way process. This important process involves several steps for acquiring a legal right to use land owned by another party to build infrastructure projects. To tell us more about this process and how it applies to the Blue Line Extension, I spoke with Matt Aguirre, the right-of-way manager. Hey, Matt. Thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
I took the job as the right-of-way manager for the Green Line Extension in December of 2017. I've held that position since, and I still do that job. And then once the Blue Line Extension came along, I was offered to become the right-of-way manager for the Blue Line Extension as well. I also have a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of Minnesota as well. So,
are you then a Metro Transit employee, or are you still working for the county?
So I'm still a MnDOT employee. I'm under contract through the Met Council, but I'm still a MnDOT employee. I was brought on to these project offices with my experience as a right-of-way manager.
What is the right-of-way process, and why is it important for transportation projects such as the Blue Line Extension?
So with any project, there will be some times where there's not enough space within the existing footprint of the right-of-way. And so sometimes there's some additional property rights that the project may need for building the infrastructure that's being proposed. And so the right-of-way process is basically, it's a very regimented state and federal process where there's guidelines both within the state and within the federal process that have to be followed. And basically what it is it's detailing out exactly what has to be done from the beginning of a project first through the design, starting the initial contact with the owners.
So how does it work? What are the stages in the right-of-way process?
So the right-of-way process is expanded over sometimes multiple years, right? So it starts with that initial contact, which is that early notification letter with the property owner. That's the first step, right? It's making that initial notification to the property owner of a potential need for property acquisition. The next step would be, a real estate representative that's under contract or working with the Met Council will then start discussing the property owner's concerns, the proposed potential acquisition for the project. It also gives that's where the property owner has that opportunity to just start talking about their concerns or elements within the property that the project office should be aware of from a design perspective. That is usually when the project office will then take all of that information and then coordinate with the design staff and create what is called a parcel sketch, a final parcel sketch. Once that final parcel sketch is created, that's when we start coordinating with a surveyor to make a description of the acquisition. We also start coordinating with the consultant appraiser, and then we start listing off the elements of what's going on the property specifically. And the consultant appraisal will then take all of that information, look at the real estate values throughout the market, and that appraiser will then establish what's called a determination of damages to the property. Once the appraisal is done, depending on what regulations are guiding that dollar amount, will then get approvals either with the council or the FTA. Once those approvals are done, we put together what's called an offer package. The offer package oftentimes includes any information about relocation, if there's any relocation involved on the property as a result of the acquisition. It also includes a packet of what the property owner's rights are and where they can refer to get the additional information. That offer is made, and that's when the negotiations begin, right? The owner can either accept or reject the offer and then make a counter offer. And, if the two parties aren't able to reach that agreement, we then go into the eminent domain process. And even within the eminent domain process, there's still negotiations that take place. Eminent domain is it's another process within the right-of-way acquisitions that's very regimented. That's where it gets really tied down into, actual law. And the eminent domain process is essentially a process for the council or a public agency to utilize and acquire property. And what it is it's giving the public agency the ability to buy the property that's needed for the project and still secure the property owner's rights as far as getting what is called just compensation. So essentially what it is we're going to make an offer to the property owner and they don't have to accept it. If they feel like there's some additional compensation that is owed, we can negotiate, and if we don't get the negotiations completed by the time that the construction office will need it, that is where the eminent domain process comes into play. It's securing our ability to still build the project, and it's securing the property owner's rights to get just compensation. On the Green Line extension, there were several properties where we actually had a settlement with the property owner, but because of the ownership rights that are intertwined into some of these properties, right? There's multiple owners or there's multiple layers into their ownership, and we're just unable to get all of those signatures from each of the entities in time. On those types of situations, we will just enter it into condemnation so that we can get the rights needed, and then we work out what's called a friendly condemnation so that we can then get them paid and still get the property rights that we need for the project.
Is the right-of-way process the same whether you are purchasing a full building or a sliver of land?
Every acquisition is nuanced differently. There's different issues with every property. It's never black and white. It's very nuanced. But in totality, the actual process for getting us to the point of making an offer is very regimented. It does not vary greatly from that. Now, obviously, if there's the differences between taking a sliver or the whole property off, if we're buying the entire property, that's where the term relocation comes into play, and that by itself has its own very, very regimented process, which is that follows what's called the uniform. Everybody refers to it as the URA, which is called the Uniform Relocation Act, and so that's a very regimented federal process that everybody that does relocation or has an acquisition that requires relocation must follow. Overall, the process does not vary. There's just nuances for each property that we have to look at in greater detail. And without getting into the specifics and not knowing each property, it varies in that regard. But as far as the overall end result and how we get to that end result does not really change.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a really interesting conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Glad to be here.
For additional information about the right-of-way process, please visit the link below. Or if you have any questions about the project in general, please contact your outreach coordinator. Thanks for watching us. See you next time.